to our speaker of the month. He is our field trip guide. He is a personal mentor to me. And he is an ecologist for the Earth Partners, a restoration firm here in our very own Houston, Texas. And we're going to talk about, well, first I want to go take a bit through Mark's resume. 15 years of experience working with diverse ecosystems, leads technical ecological restoration projects, especially include master of many different things, including delineation and compliance and regulations that all go towards fixing what we've done to damage our environment. Brought him in today to talk about a bit more complex and philosophical topic. It's a bit veering off course in the direction we've gone previously with our speakers, because I think it's kind of foundational and critical that we reevaluate our assumptions about what our role is in our environment and what it means to have human habitat in general, since we can't really separate ourselves from the environment and ecology. So brace for it. But welcome all. Thank you for coming back again. Andy Newman.
I sat here and co-present. You're more than welcome to.
I will.
I'm gonna get your slide for you.
Oh, okay. Was it on there?
Yeah.
Do I need this? Do I have to have this for that?
Wouldn't hurt.
I think the people on Zoom need.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it helps. It helps.
I want you all to talk a lot, so I'm sorry for if you're on Zoom. But if all possibility, this is meant to be engagement. Oh, my slides are messed up. I didn't say that. Cool. So no title. That's even better actually time for this talk, right? I think the picture is actually like way more informative than the words, to be honest. So I was originally gonna call this, well, we'll get to that, but no, but seriously, like, I've never done a talk like this. Josh thinks I know things, I don't know anything. And I'm gonna point that out. But wait, where's my thing at? Where'd it go? There, disclaimer. I've learned this. This is probably one of the most out there talks I've ever given. I'm just gonna be honest with y'all, but it's not about you, right? It's about me. I'm seriously. So like, if there's not meant to be any offense or bending of minds, except for mine, because I realized, like, as I've gone through life, I thought I knew things, and now I realize I really don't know much of anything. But if I'm gonna do my job most accurately, I think that this is the start of where I used to hold on to all this stuff. And what I realized is, like, this is all so complex that when I've tried to hold on to stuff in the past, it just always fails. And I think, okay. So this idea originally originated right in this room. I was sitting right where the lady in tie-dye, I was sitting about right there. And I was meeting, mostly, it was a group, it was the first ever discussion for this Houston Ecological Restoration, was it discussion group for the Texas Society of Ecological Restoration, right? And it was mostly probably people that you may know that are urban, suburban restoration planners. And the biggest thing I heard was that they were doing these, there's so much frustration, right? Because they go out to Nash Prairie, they go to like the Strand Prairie, they go to, pick your favorite spot that you've been to, they're like, this is what, yeah, whatever it might be. But you're like, oh, or piney, like big piney woods, or like big ticket area, like that in their mind, they were like, oh, I want that here, right? But like, look at the goats here, right? I mean, the goats are here right now, but like, look at this area. Is this what it used to be? But it is now, right? And that's where I brought up in that scene so much frustration of expectations versus reality. In terms of like, this is what it is.
The goats are out there too.
But the goats are coming here maybe, but like, I mean, do you want to run a fire right up to the building? I don't know, is that smart? Who knows, right? I mean, maybe, but this idea popped in my head, this polyclimax paradox, which very simply stated is, for whatever reason, if you were to manage this in different ways, the expression of the vegetation that you could see here, and then ultimately what fungi live there, what bugs live there, how we interact with it, could be totally different. Same acreage, but based on a myriad of things, could manifest itself in so many different ways, right? And that was kind of my idea, is like, same acre, but whatever we chose to do or not do with it, totally different outcome, right? Potentially. So that's kind of like the inception point of this idea was right here. And so it's cool that I get to maybe push it forward a little bit more with y'all. And honestly, like the reflection on engineering ecology is like, I've done some crazy stuff in my life and I'm trying to be less crazy, or maybe you're trying to be more crazy. I don't know, right? But from my experience, I've realized that ultimately when it comes to work, when it comes to comfortability, like I was a cage animal expecting so much out of life, and then I realized that like I really don't have much control of anything. And the more I saw that, I got to rewild my mind, right? It's like, well, it's gonna be, it's like, don't know, find out, right? It's like, but and it sounds so simple, but it's not. Like, how does that how does that affect us in terms of, you know, there's some professionals in here, there's some hobbyists in here, there's something maybe I don't even know why you're here. You might not know why you're here. You know, and after today, you're gonna probably like leave early and be like, not coming back. And if this gets too much, dude, if y'all want to break down like the Keens of Bryncospora or like bristle hairs or the Antros retroverse, we can get into the nitty gritty on things.
Sorry.
So we can do that. But I really do, as much as possible, want to make this interactive. I've definitely included some aspects to this talk that I've never done before. Some like little stories, parables, some questions that this is all new for me. But no matter how this goes, if you're willing afterwards, come tell me, be like, that was interesting, it's awful, like pointless, or whatever it might be. Because I mean, that's the thing I've realized the most with like even coming up with what I came in here. And so whatever I do, say I know all about this restoration space, is what I realize is that if you can't tell the story and you can't tell the message and people don't see what might be dirtying their lens of perception, how could you ever come to a shared language? Or shared values? I mean, maybe we can't, and that's okay. But this talk is supposed to explore that, so.
We're here to talk about values and how we perceive the world, you know, and we have an extra mic, so if you have any questions, please raise your hand. And this off.
We won't talk too much about it. I'll let y'all read for a little bit, but I did want to start with, like, in ecology, like regenerative ag, kind of this concept of rewilding, right? As I pull, these are probably the two most common definitions. I think that England, Britain, it's a lot further along than some of this is in America. But look at my background in relationship to this, is there's a lot of people, but that's the Pleistocene mammals that used to live here. We had mammoths, we had horses, we had all those species that it basically would look like Africa. You walked out there, right? There's multiple species of bison, and there's a lot of people that say we should go back to that. Maybe we should, I don't know. But it's definitely something that like some ends of the spectrum on the rewilding want to do that. I mean, we had camels here. I mean, we had, you know, why can the pronghorn antelope run 60+ miles an hour? Why would you waste your effort on that? Unless you realize there was an American cheetah, right? So you want the speed because you had a predator that could run you down. But now we don't have a cheetah. Yeah.
I'm being interactive.
Yes, do it. I love it.
So, yeah, so that is before humans were here. Some of it, I mean, there were some Native American Indian mammoths, etc. But what they call the Anthropocene, where humans have altered the environment to fit us.
This is part of the whole discussion, right?
Yeah.
Is around that, and I think that like we'll get to some places that, and there's probably parts of it, the challenge. There's a lot of it's meant to challenge me. There's probably parts that are going to challenge you.
Yeah, like why get a dire wolf now because they were extinct before we get here? When we're losing species every day.
Sure.
It's a brand of direwolf, it's actually a red wolf. slap this huge.
Yes,
several
yeah,
changes.
yes, I know.
Yes.
So I'm done with
Well, and feel free to share as we go throughout, because I think that like, part of this is. Hopefully we'll unveil for all of us some aspects of what is species or what is this thing that maybe we totally miss, right? I know, because I know I do. And I'm getting better at, hopefully at seeing to where I can interact better. So it's the first time ever. I just put together a little story. It's kind of as a start framing this up. I'll let y'all read it for a second. So I'm gonna throw a hypothetical out there. Do you think a Chinese tallow seed cares where it grows? Being serious.
I think, they take it to you.
Wait, did it pick here or it just ended up here?
Someone brought it.
Why, but it didn't choose to be here. It just said, oh, you brought me down here, I'm gonna grow. What was that?
We didn't choose to be driving.
Well, you didn't be in that place, you can really go further. It is deep. Well, you know, like another one is like interesting, like, so that, you know, towel is a little bit like jarring. But you know, like everyone thinks cattle egrets, right? The white birds hang out the cows are like this ambiguous, like always been here. New world species. Like they got picked, like 50 of them got picked up in a hurricane and thrown over to like to Brazil. Like I think it's in the 40s, 1940s, 50s. I've seen in Canada, right? I mean, so it's kind of like, but part of this is to be like, what is time? Like, can you actually know time? And then like what belongs, right? Is that, does a tallow actually care what you think of it, but you care what you think about a tallow? That's kind of the inflection point I want to be like. And there's I mean, should we do something about tallow? Maybe.
Does it deserve our hate though?
Yes.
Yeah. Does it?
Maybe, but but I think the point I would like to like start playing with here is that like, you can, if you just accept it as it is, that doesn't mean that you have to have an opinion about it, but it's like, can the problem then be actually the solution, right? Yes,
The honeybee. Love the tallow.
of course, that's their best honey,
Is that considered agriculture?
is it? I mean, I think, I don't have any answers for anything.
Oh.
I'm just gonna tell you right now.
They're what you think.
But that's point, I think that's part of it, like, is how much, and we'll get more into, but like, how many biases do we have that like, are we collectively making decisions for the betterment of what? And at what level? On what time scale?
Yeah.
Yeah, but the honeybees really need tallow.
Yeah, but.
No.
Aren't native either.
Yeah, that was the point at which I.
But most of
Oh.
our crops are not.
I think she said the honeybees are not native either.
Honeybees
Or do the honeybees actually like the tallow, or is that just what is there to eat? Is that what you meant?
You wanna give this
They
lady?
don't have to eat tallow.
In my
Yard for 21 years or so, I was a so-called lazy gardener, and I went from nursery type plants to totally native. And if it didn't survive, then it wasn't meant to be there. And I never had to water my yard. And I used that long time lapse to observe how everything was functioning in the system, whether it was wind or the sunlight, or blooming sideways, the insects landing on, whatever it was. And it was always an attractive garden because it had a good form to it and everything was healthy, it had good tree coverage, like that. But then when I started working at Green Nature Club, with all the diversity that was there, we had this explosion of golden nature that took over. And during the pandemic, I say we, many hands removed 4,000 golden ring trees on just 1 acre.
Wow.
Okay, so this is the power of scouts, because these were, 3 inches and 6 feet tall type of variables, and we documented every single one. So the ethical question is, should we have let those 3 parents, spawn the seeds and let that place be overgrown with golden rain tree? In my opinion, we needed every single acre of biodiversity. We needed every single square inch of biodiversity, because that biodiversity is the strength of our future, just as it is in the human population. Diversity is our strength. And so we worked arduously to remove anything that would create a monoculture, whether it was the tallow, whether it was a golden olive tree, whether it was a preponderance of a certain grass. We worked arduously to create biodiversity intentionally, because that was our responsibility as stewards. And so it took its own form, and certain things took off, and the evolution of that one little acre in 10 years has been amazing. It's like a person who ages, and they change in their face and their physiology and everything. And we've seen it in that property. But had we let those golden rain trees grow, the place would have been in terms of completeness. And there would not be the insect populations there. There would not be the pollinators there. There would not be the biodiversity of foliage that's there. There would not be the animals, the urban animals that we see around. So, I have to draw a line on certain things, and I had kids always asking me, well, is it really bad to have this? And that really caused an ethical discussion between us. But I just want to give you one case of, is a seed good or is a seed not good? And in those cases, the seed was not good, because 1 acre in the city of Houston is so precious for biodiversity.
What was the name of
Well. Cause you buckle up, cause hold on to that steward word. But like, how can you have good without evil?
that? Excellent.
Wexler! So I don't think we necessarily answer this one, but like, I think it's a good time to take stock. Why are you here? What are you interested in? What's your context of coming here? Just kind of, why? And then I don't think we have to, these are more just to think about, right?
How active a role of stewardship do we need to be taking? Let's think it's a big debate too. How active versus passive in the ecosystem?
I think right now, I wanna shift more to like thinking about you personally, what you might hold on to. Or how have you seen that change over time? How does that interact with how you may or may not do something on the landscape? Like I said, I don't know anything. I don't have opinions anymore. Just what ifs.
That last line.
But this one, is this nature? I mean, but like, is it?
Are skyscrapers not nature too? Even though they're not natural, that the distinguishing word. Still made by us, right? There's no distinct fountain.
I know there's humans have been villainized a lot, and I guess in our field. And part of it has become internalized for me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until
Yes.
one of my friends they told me, hey, humans are a keystone species. And I really sat there and thought with it, and I'm like, oh, we are. Why can't it's so it's like I look at certain things, and I'm like, humans doing this, humans doing that. And it's just like, we're animals, and it's so easy for me to forget that, and it's so silly.
Yeah.
It's very silly. There's this giant, giant disconnect for all of us. And it's just something we all need to sit with, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's further, and I was driving on some ag culture the other day, and I was thinking about like, oh, if you think about however old our DNA is, I'm like, is driving past thousands of acre corn natural? Like, what does that do? But internally, what does that do to you? Like, right, there's no diversity. It's one monoculture. But it's along those lines of like, but how might subtly that stuff actually influence I mean, my general disposition just to life, period, right? And I
Right.
mean,
Sorry, I think that monoculture, do you think that contributes to the idea of plant blindness, that people tune out what they see because we're so used to just seeing it's all just grass or it's all just corn? There's no distinction to recognize.
Just plants.
Just one of the same plant over and over again.
yeah, I think it's like in that kind of as this arose in that talk, like when people. Oh, we're expressing a lot of what you were expressing. I was like, well, beavers do it. Like beavers modify their habitat to their advantage, but then all these other species evolved around them. Look at starlings. Starlings are blessed by humans. Rock doves blessed by humans. I mean, house sparrows blessed by humans. I mean, and cultivated cat. I mean, yeah, right.
That's.
And then, so I mean, it's like, again, no right or wrong, but I think that some of this does come down to how do you expand your mind and think about geologic time, earth time, thousands, millions of years? I don't know.
Which species are most notable? Keystone.
Yeah, the passenger pigeon
Their
is definitely
environmental-
blessed by
their interaction
humans.
with Their environment. I mean, we're talking about beavers, what they do to raise water tables and the species diversity that ensues after they create these structures. I mean, it's lucky to us is to talk about which species are the most competent or potential, have the most potential as environmental engineers. I think it's the way I see it, at least. So.
Okay. Now the fun part. Does anyone have a maybe initial reaction that they would be willing to share?
But you're out in the middle of wilderness, and you're vulnerable in the wilderness for over 2 or 3 days. Those lenses start changing. In solitude in the wilderness, and you start feeling things that you hadn't felt before. You start seeing things you hadn't felt before. You start hearing things that you had not felt before. And that's why lignotrace is so important to practice when the fruit goes out. But I think only in the immersion of nature does that transformation of your perception really start happening. And it takes a while. It may take a week out of nature, a solid week out of nature. It may take 3 days, it may take 1 night. But it changes. And that's the gift that nature gives us, is the ability to transform our perception of everything and to allow us to be more acute in our observations and our sensory systems.
But are you exposed, are you immersed in the wilderness right now? Are you devaluing what humans are right now? I don't know.
But
But I'm, but
We are
like,
part of nature.
but you said out there I can be that, but why not right here?
Well, I could if I spent 3 days sitting in one spot in the Eastern Arboretum woods. And I've done.
But why not right here in this chair?
Because it's not nature.
Oh, it's, okay, why is it not nature?
Because it doesn't have roots, it doesn't have leaves, it doesn't have, it's not a plant systems, it's constructed by man. It's static.
But I'm saying, but you are a condensation of sunlight from the plants that you ate, maybe not the plants you ate, maybe the meat you
I
ate.
don't refer to this. Not
Okay.
this room with these people and these constructs.
Okay.
I don't refer to this.
So that could be something that like of the lens that, this is a great example of the lens that you have, that could be a constricted point. Perfect.
Anyone else?
This isn't very deep, but I think a lot of people have lenses that they fear nature and they think they're separate from
100%.
nature. And they are scared. We hear a lot of people complain about, they don't want tall grass because they don't want snakes. Or, you know, they're afraid of being immersed in nature. And that's a lens that nature's a threat.
Yeah, and I think that like, I mean, to your point, so like, someone at that point is like, how would you then communicate with someone now when you're willing to go out and tear apart all these rain trees with another person that like, I worked at flood control for a little bit, and the guy that did the vegetation management, he's like, people like to see nature but not touch nature, even though they aren't, like, they are nature. But like, they want the grass like that tall, right? And they're like, if they're not even willing to intergrass this tall, like, why would they ever remove, they would say, well, that might not be a native species, but I'm not gonna even walk in that grass to remove it, right? And so this is more just to show like how we could communicate, or how we, you know, barriers that could be there for communication blockages for us.
I think that's crucial for us in native plant society too. I'm relatively new here, but what I've seen and what's kept coming back here for me is this very approachable platform to talk about native plants, to learn about native plants, and the people here are very welcome, a bit more approachable than a lot of the other experts in other societies. And this is also from feedback that I get. But what is our role here, in my opinion at least, is to be communicators, to shine spotlights on certain subjects and aspects of how we can better the world and the way we interact with it. So for me, to answer that question, it's something that the way that shapes my world and why I spend my time here. Man, would you like to talk? Thank you.
So I think that people are nature, and when we say we need to go out and observe nature, we also need to observe people. And I see this with children. So my daughter went many years to Montessori school, which is based on observing the child. And you're observing the child in their habitat, which is their classroom and the playground, and as opposed to some traditional schools where there's a rocking chair and kids. You're not observing the child, you're not behaving on the child. So it's more like with, you know, some more stricter landscaping where you're pushing a structure and a formal thing as opposed to a, so it applies to people as well as plants and birds and everything else.
How our environments shape us, the way we see the world, like the cornrows. So, thank you. That's a very great point. Anyone else? Johnson? With you next.
You know, I was thinking about what we define as nature, and it's interesting because last month I got the opportunity to go to Vancouver Ranch. I'm Johnson City, Texas, and I didn't really have the opportunity as a kid to have that immersion, as you were talking about. But waking up in the morning and not hearing cars, I mean, that was spiritual. Like, like I didn't realize how.
Amen.
Honestly, yes, I didn't realize how deprived I was of that experience. It was ethereal. It's like I woke up and like, where am I? Is this heaven? Is this like, and it's this thing that nature to me is a feeling that I feel in my body. I feel it in my skin. It's something primal. And it feels like this just is what it's supposed to be. I feel like there's not really a hard set definition to it. And sometimes I like watching ants just crawl on an oak tree. There's like one oak tree in a parking lot, and it's just a sea of hot concrete and nothing else. But that little ant is immersed, you know, and that ant is feeling like it's where it's supposed to be. Even though if you just go a bit further out, it's just like not even a desert. It doesn't have like that has like what, a couple weeks to the plants growing there that are also just trying to be alive, and they just are where they are and they're growing. So it's very interesting if you just zoom out or zoom in to where you're at, I feel like you can always find a little spot. Just in your own body, just look at your hands, your veins, your body. You're in it, you are it, you know?
And our bodies mimic the natural systems. At the overall event last Friday, one of the presenters was showing images of like the veining the leaf and a river system, and then our lungs and our circulatory systems, and they look a lot alike. There's some common themes there. We are part of nature.
Thank you, Dory.
I think the drywall boxes that we build and the air conditioning that we use shape how everyone sees nature, because you're either inside and comfortable or outside, and oftentimes, especially this week, now that it's so hot, uncomfortable. But if we could figure out a way to build with passive cooling techniques and ways to blend the outside with the inside, I think more people would be up to being comfortable outside as opposed to uncomfortable or comfortable.
Ned?
So obviously the talk has shifted towards us being a natural species. That's what we are. We're humans, we're animals. And yet with our power as humans, we've shaped the world to cater towards us. And we've domesticated plants and we've domesticated animals, and falling out of tune with nature just kind of seems like we've domesticated ourselves. So the question that's, having this talk that came to my mind is, how domesticated are the domesticators? Exactly.
All right, I'm a bonsai artist, and I am in the process of converting my collection to Texas natives. That's the whole reason I joined here. My personal setup, I live in a patio home, so I don't have the place for a lot of the native grasses or anything like that. So my contribution to the diversity is by maintaining and preserving the diversity of the different Texas natives. The Houston Bonsai Society, which I am an active member of, we do what we call collections, where we go out and we dig up trees to add to our collections. We usually go to Annex Reservoir. And what we are required to do is for every native we take, we have to take an invasive as well. But that is one of the things we do to try to do. So we don't really do that in February, when it is the best time for the trees. We have some yes, we have a lot of non-natives. Like I said, I'm in the process of converting my collection to mostly natives. And I'm encouraging a lot of people within the Houston Bonsai Society to also do it. But we are fighting the Japanese. You need to do the Japanese flag pine. You need to do this. But we also have some members going, hey, look what we do, the lava.
If you ever want to, I would love for you to bonsai Quercus and Cana. Blue Jacko. I'll show you. It's dope. I tried to go on the last collection, but something came up. No, it's awesome. No, but I mean, I love that because that's one of my ideas is like, how can you bonsai this to where, right, you have even, albeit as small a space as you live in, you have that connection, right? And like, you haven't lost it.
See, I'm also allergic to ants and wasps. If I get bit by or stung by any of those, if I'm unlucky, I gotta make a trip to the hospital. So I have to limit how much nature I can have in the course myself.
For our own lenses, I was really excited about my extreme growth of the native plant I put in, and I pointed out, look at my husband, I was like, look how beautiful they are, aren't they wonderful? And he says, they look like leaves.
That's
Like, cause we're so used to those little hedges in the box and the lawn. I was like, no,
That is true. When my mother and stepfather came to visit, my stepfather thought my yard was all full of weeds. He's like, yeah, I've very lovingly grown all those weeds. Archie.
Hi, everyone. I'd just like to share a story about my upbringing. I am a first generation American Filipino, which means I was born here. And my grandma was from the Philippines. I had the luxury of growing up there. So all she knew about nature and just being in America was what she collected from the Philippines and whatnot. I also had the opportunity to live there for a few years. And what I realized about, the people from the Philippines is that they had a very strong respect for nature, and it trickled down all the way to just the common person on the street and whatnot. And it just made me think about like, how did my upbringing with my grandma, how did it change my perception of nature? And I remember so it's common in the Philippines to just find a place to pee in the corner. That's just the thing that they do out there. But every time we do that, we have a saying, and we have to say "tabi tabi po." And if you directly translate that, you're basically saying, "Excuse me, ma'am, excuse me, sir." And that stemmed because there was a strong respect for nature, and there's a belief that there was like mythical creatures around there. And if you didn't do that, you would get sick. And it's just little stories like that that I shared with my grandma, and realizing why I'm in the field that I am today is because there was just this strong relationship that I had, that my grandma had, and she borrowed it from the Filipino people. And I don't really see that much happening anymore, like being here and whatnot, but I would like to see some form of that going on. So I don't know, that's just a story.
Thank you, Archie. You mean here in American culture?
Well, I don't know.
It's fair critique. Thank you. And you make it wrong.
Which one is this one in control?
Well, I don't know. You mess it up.
Of course, you wait until I take a bite of a donut, Janine technical spit.
Pardon us, folks, we there in just a second. There we go.
There you go, just. We'll skip past that one.
You're gonna skip that, okay.
Yeah. We'll just go, I mean, I think everyone's probably heard like cognitive biases, cognitive dissonance. We'll talk about a couple ones that I think are, that I've run into, and say on a more doing this professionally, the ones that I've run into that I think that I've encountered the most is one of them is like this assumption that we know what plans and timelines are. Going back to that climax idea, like, you know, if you look at this idea of this is, say, a person's timeline here, I mean, to me, what's the biggest glaring thing is like, how could you know it's gonna get to the project? I mean, I know it's a target, but like, if you go into that, especially with a lot of our regulatory programs that are supposed to protect the resources, they're very specific about you have to go to here. And it's one that they're set up well, but they're very tight about what you can and can't do. And if, even though the system might want to go and do this whole different, like say it wants to be a prairie instead of a forested system. Is that a failure?
Subjective.
But it would be underneath, like, if you had a federal permit to do this work instead of supposed to be a forested system. So I mean, it's just, you know, I think that that control bias is one that like, I didn't realize how pervasive it was. But when it comes to, you know, projects that y'all might be a part of, how big of an influence it can actually have on project. I mean, what is the outcome, right? Or what is success? Expanding our minds kind of to, what does that mean? Is one that I didn't realize how much control bias oftentimes dictate projects, especially if there's a lot of financial aspects to the project.
And on the micro scale, it's our backyards, our wildscapes. What is it supposed to be? Ultimately, it comes down a lot of time to what you think you want it to be. But in terms of the grand scale, this can be zoomed in and out.
Yeah, and if you look at, if you're using natives, they don't stay where you planned for them to be. Cause I have 100 and something species in my yard and they find where they are happiest and it's usually not where I put them. So they will move and replant themselves somewhere they are happier. And I have come to think, if that is not my control, if the plant's happy, I'm gonna leave it. I have to give up some control. At least I do. That's my choice, cause I don't care if it looks wild.
Give up control bonds.
So, Andy, are you suggesting that the USDA or whoever,
Are you suggesting that the USDA or whoever creates that ecological satisfaction system, kind of abandon those rules?
I don't have an answer for you yet, but I'm working on it. The cool thing I will say about the fact that we have built silicone system to help us, if you will, if you want to view it as help, is that we take all these biases in. But when you plug it into a model, it breaks it down to zeros and ones, nothing, something, and its ability, again, now, it might have a bias built in, but that's gonna probably be on the user or the user's bias. And then to me, part of the reason that I'm doing this talk is to workshop with y'all. Where is the sticking points between our communication? What do you see? That's why I'm seriously asking for issues, because if say you had a more progressive governance, if you will, or policy, is that the model might be amazing. But if you can't interface that out to individual humans and where they are and meet them where they are, then you're gonna have a lot of issues, because you might see the same data that I see in terms of numbers or pictures or whatnot. But if your lens sees this and my lens sees this, which maybe it's inevitable and it's irreversible, who knows? But I think that that's part of what this is pointing to, is seeing that ultimately, when it comes to if that was what we might do for project success, is that it's really the interface with humans to be like, oh, we can agree that this is what we would like to try or achieve. And then it's not like ever a fix, and that's, I think the climax bias is like, what's the fixed point? When's their climax? Or like, does it change?
Is this the climax we want? For Houston? Or is this the one? Yeah.
But pursuant to the point of what if the poly climax for this is, you know what, when you had bison and fire, that probably was that, right? Easy, probably, right? But now it's more closer to that one. So this actually might be, with the conditions that it currently has, that's the most stable form that it can exhibit. Potentially. This is one I really didn't think about that much until recently. It's charismatic bias. How much you go out and like, I love this flower. But do you see the other flowers around it? Do you see the fungi associated with it? I don't most of the time. And I think it's one that, like, for me, like, it's one that I really did not think about that much, how this influences my interaction with the observation of the natural world.
It's got a Chinese towel up there, Andy. I didn't know you liked it so much.
These are just the top observations of plants on iNaturals for Harris County. So it's fitting that you're both, that your second most dominant is Chinese towel, and then I just did sedges like Cyperaceae, right? Your second most common one is deep root sedge. Also,
South American. Yeah. No, these are just the highest density in terms of observations that we have in our area. And invasives coming in second place, you know, the worst ones we call it. deep-rooted sedge from South America, Chinese tallow, mainland Asia. But the point is to bring on what's here now and what do we focus on? This is the result, so there's something in that. Skip that one. We'll come back.
The story's meant to kind of illuminate that last point to me.
One way we try to objectify a situation when we teach the environmental science merit badge to scouts is they have to do a transect in 2 locations. And in one of the locations, well, in both locations, they have to count as many species as they can. And so it's enhancing their powers of observation. And it's causing them to have to notice the things that are not so obvious. And it's a really, really good test. I really enjoyed that, going through that process with scouts. It is a requirement for the environmental science merit badge. And, you know, our schools don't require that. They don't require strengthening your observation skills, your survival skills, your, you know, and so, that's one way that we can get away from that kind of charismatic bias is by appreciating everything that's in there. When you are required to do an exercise like that in order to achieve.
I think we're gonna stop, because I ran into my professor friend, and originally, this was originally 12 slides. I mean, this is not 12 slides like this form, but 12 original idea slides. And this is actually what she told me what happened. She's like, you can spend 45 minutes easily on slide 2. So we just went through slide 2. It seems there's more slides than that. I don't want to go into slide 3 because it gets way out there, but there's 12 more in a logical way, and it gets like way out there. But I will say, if people like this, I would be more than willing, not maybe in this format, but like if this was interesting or fun to people, is think about hosting this maybe at a coffee shop or on a Zoom or whatnot, because like to me, this is really fun. This is where I'm at in life, because like I think that the more open I can become and the more compassionate, and like I think as Carl Jung said, he's like the more you can turn inward and know the depths of like your own personal hell, when you run across someone and they tell you some stuff, you know what? You be like, I do that. And then you can actually love that person and be with that person in a way, be like, maybe I'm not done it that way, but I could, or I could do it way worse if I wanted to, right? And that to me is like, as I don't know, whatever the hell, the lens of my perception is clean. This stuff just becomes like, I really don't know, but I feel like it just feels way more natural. And I can be anywhere. I can be out in the middle, is like here in the mountains, beautiful. I can be underneath the rainfall in Costa Rica, or I can be right here with you. And feel that same level of like, this is it. Wherever, like right, wherever I go, there I am. You know?
You're it.
So we could take maybe a moment or two if anyone has any thoughts.
Yeah. Last minute questions or any?
I can jump to
discussion.
I'm back. I'll tease you with the last slide.
Oh, too many. Any last thoughts? Anyone want to share anything? Thank you for bearing with us on this experiment, and this, thought experiment, if you will, but also the lesson perspective. And it's kind of a new direction we're trying to go to do things to be more effective as Native Plant Society of Texas, but we have to reframe questions if the same problem keeps reappearing. But that was our thought.
And as much as we want to ask this of ourselves, we also need to think about that for other people, because people walk by my yard and a lot of them tell me that, oh, I love what you're doing here. But I'm sure the people that don't love it don't say that anything. And so we have to think about the other people's lens out there in the world, and we want to change more hearts and minds to get rid of their St. Augustine lawns and be more engaged in the natural world and not separate themselves from it. So we really want to I think you have to look inward, like Andy said, to
Yeah.
figure out what your lenses are to help overcome other people's lenses and get them to change their perceptions too.
And if you want, come see me afterwards. I put together a handout I can email you that has a series of questions and then kind of like these deep inquiries that are more just meant to contemplate this stuff further. So if anyone's interested, see me afterwards and I can share that. And then, like I said, I mean, if this interests some of y'all, maybe this is not the right forum for it. I don't know. Y'all can make that as a decision on the group. But if there's a subgroup or whatnot that would like to explore this in a much deeper way, I mean, I'm been a good boy, not said bad words, but I would love to be in a situation where I can just say whatever I want to say, however I want to say it.
And then you've all been on a field trip, you know what he means.
So,
Any last questions before we wrap this up? Going once?
I go.